Well, I'm en route up to Las Vegas to visit Shelby American, the brainchild of Carroll Shelby. They were the builders of the infamous Shelby Mustangs. They're back at that again, building Shelby Mustangs, as well as the infamous Shelby Cobra. And they're back at that too, building the Shelby Cobra again. Carroll Shelby's built a lot of different cars over the years with Ford and with Chrysler and off on his own. It's very interesting history. He's been at this for a long, long time. He's no longer with us. He just died recently, which is unfortunate. But his company lives on here in Las Vegas, and we're going to get a chance to see some of the really historic Mustangs and Cobras that they have there, as well as visit the back shop areas where they're building the new cars. So it should be a gas.
For over 10 years, Shelby American has been located at the Las Vegas International Speedway. But by the time you see this footage, they will have relocated to the Las Vegas Strip. Something about getting more walk-in traffic or some such nonsense. Myself, I find the Speedway way more interesting than the Strip. They give tours every day at the museum areas, as well as the assembly areas in back. If you're there early enough in the day, then you can see those things. But the real attraction are the historic Mustangs and Cobras on display in the museum areas. Just an absolutely fantastic collection of automobiles. Carroll Shelby was an absolute legend in motor racing in the 1960s.
My name's Carroll Shelby, and performance is my business.
Carroll Shelby was a driver earlier in the 1950s, but because of a heart problem, he was banned from racing for fear that he might die behind the wheel and cause a major accident. So he switched over to manufacturing race cars and running his own driving team. His legendary move came when he shoved a Ford V8 engine into a European-made sports car, the AC Ace, which he dubbed the Shelby Cobra. To say that Shelby was successful at this was one of the great understatements. Within just a few years, he had taken over international racing and pushed Ferrari right off the podium. What you see here is the very first AC Cobra, an AC Ace with a Ford 260 stuffed in it. This one was taken to shows. It was a product that he was intended to race and sell to sports car enthusiasts. It's basically unmodified from the AC Ace, other than the fact that it has this massive V8 engine stuffed into the front of it. The car was hugely successful. Everybody wanted a Cobra, although not very many people could afford one. They had the fastest 0 to 60 time ever recorded by a production car. Most of these brutes had 289 engines shoved in them, but later on, Carroll Shelby decided he wanted an even more brutal version, the 427 Cobra, with the large block 427 shoved in it, and this one is the very first 427 Cobra ever built. This time, this was not a simple modification. This was a rebuild from the ground up. Still looks like the AC Ace, but boy, it's nothing like the AC Ace. The 427s were just brutal, and between the 427s and the 289s and another variation, the hardtop coupe, these things were just winning every race they entered. This is the coupe, the Daytona Coupe. There were only 6 of these built, and they were all just intended for racing. By giving them a hardtop coupe design, it really improved their aerodynamics and therefore their top speed. The Daytona Coupes were truly unstoppable. There was a plan to build a 427 version of this. This thing only has a 289 in it. But the 427 project was never finished because Shelby moved on to another project, the Ford Gt500, which proved to be way faster than any of the Cobras and even faster than the 427 Coupe had they ever finished it. It was at this same point in time that Shelby came up with the Shelby Mustangs. These were sent to him by Ford, and then those were modified in his facility into some pretty kick-butt cars.
This GT350 is a racing version of Ford's Mustang 2+2. We set the cars up for racing by installing special components, racing shocks and so on. We're doing a lot of testing as well.
The Mustangs did not compete against the Cobras as they were in a completely different division, and this allowed Shelby to now win races in 2 separate categories with his cars. Mustangs weren't anything as extreme as the Cobras, but boy are they a lot of fun to drive. In 1967, Ford increased the size of the Mustang to accommodate big block engines. This allowed Carroll Shelby to come up with a new version of the car, the Shelby Gt500, with a 428 big block in it. The car you see here is actually a 1968 GT350 with the small block in it. In 1969 and 1970, the car went through yet another design change. Here we see a 1969 GT500. In the 1990s, Shelby moved over to Chrysler, building some of the same kind of modified cars for Chrysler. Here we have the GLH. Shelby said that stood for Goes Like Hell. And this beauty is called a Series 1, Shelby's only attempt at building a ground-up design of his own. The only thing not Shelby is the engine, which is an Oldsmobile engine. In 2005, Shelby went back to modifying Mustangs, this time with the newly designed Mustang by Ford. Shelby has offered perhaps 24 different variations on the Mustang since they started this project. Few of the Mustangs are built here in Las Vegas. Most of them are built by Ford and then shipped out to the dealerships. But a small handful of those cars are returned here to Shelby in Las Vegas to be turned into some of their most exotic Shelby Mustangs, the GT350 and the Super Snakes. The Super Snakes are just brutal. There's a 700, a 1000, and an 1100 horsepower version. But if you're looking for something to drive, the GT350 is a much more drivable car and a real nice track car. Now, I promised you that we'd be able to go into the back and see the manufacturing of the cars, but the Shelby people don't want me taking my camera back there. So, what I've done is I've hired a classically trained courtroom sketch artist to sketch that for us. The back areas are divided into 2 different areas, the Cobra assembly area and the Mustang assembly area. The Cobra assembly area is much smaller than the Mustang assembly area, as they build fewer Cobras than they do Mustangs. These are referred to as the continuation Cobras, as they are a continuation of the old 60s version. Unlike the original 60s version, however, these have fiberglass bodies instead of aluminum bodies. They're also delivered with no engine in them, so that they are considered a kit car or a component car under federal regulations. The Mustangs are constructed in a much larger area of the building because they built a lot more Mustangs than they do Cobras, and it requires a lot more people to build the Mustangs than the Cobras. While I was there were only 3 Cobras under construction, but there were well over a dozen Mustangs being put together in the Mustang areas. All of these cars were delivered to Shelby as GT500s that had already been sold to buyers who now wanted to modify into the more exotic versions, the GT350 and the Super Snake. I never thought I'd live to see the day when Shelby would be back making souped-up Mustangs, but here we are, and I, for one, am very happy to see it. For what it's worth, people accuse me of having a Shelby Mustang, but it really isn't. It is a BDX Mustang built by the Barber Driving Experience in California.
Well, there it is, Shelby American of Las Vegas, Nevada. Really fun. I've always been a big fan of Carroll Shelby and all of his cars. Loved them back in the 60s, still love them today. And just an amazing history, an amazing man. He's passed away, he's no longer with us now. But the great news is the company lives on, and they're still making specialty Mustangs, and they're still building the Shelby Cobra, and what a great thing that is. Well, do subscribe to the YouTube channel here. Look for the movies on Vimeo, or like me on Facebook. You can pick the movies up in all of those places. Share the links with your friends and see if they find any interest in this. I hope they do. I'm not sure how you found me on the internet, but I hope you didn't find me boring. And I'll have a new movie up here again in a week. See you then.